Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto and you're listening to our continued daily coverage of the 2022 Iditarod here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com and be sure to search us out over on social media using the same name, Dogworks Radio. You can also find us on any of the podcast apps. So if Spotify is giving you problems, head on over to Apple or Stitcher, and I'm sure it will work itself out. And I am joined tonight by my co-host, Toni Reitter, calling in from the Kenai Peninsula here in Alaska. Toni, how's it going?
It's windy and gray. It started off really nice, calm wind and blue sky, and now we are gray with lots of wind, and I think it's threatening snow, and I'm blaming you because you said the S word yesterday.
You know, we got a little bit of snow last night, but I think we're on the up end of it. It is a beautiful day right now, and it seems to be a pretty nice day out on the Iditarod Trail, even though it's separated by, 500 or 600 miles from here and much further from you. But let's do a quick correction if we can. Last night we were talking about the vet program and all of the great things that they do, and we mentioned the Golden Clipboard Award, and that is not just for the vets, that's for the entire checkpoint. So for example, if the Ruby checkpoint is voted on as the best, that includes the vets and the checkers and everybody that is there, the volunteers, the judges, everybody. So that's what the Golden Clipboard is for. So we always want to make sure that we do corrections. And let's talk a little bit about standings. We have in first place Brent Sass, followed by Dallas Seavey, Aaron Burmeister, Richie Deal, and Jesse Holmes. And in the back of the pack, we have Lisbeth Norris, Kaylin Davis, Yuka Honda, and Apayak Reitter, I believe is how you say it, followed by Eric Kelly. So first, right off the bat, I want to talk a little bit about the folks in the back of the pack. Toni, for the last few days, the three ladies there, Yuka Honda, Kaylin Davis, and Lisbeth Norris, have been traveling together, and it looks like that is no longer the case. Yuka Honda has jumped up and took off on her own, and she is now a little bit ahead of her, so they're not running together. Do you have a story at all about that or something from the insider?
I have not heard anything about the back of the pack in the last few days. I know that Liz Taylor is kind of in charge of giving us those stories, and she's been stuck between checkpoints that have the ability to fly her out. And so I think that's part of why we don't know what's going on with the back of the pack. I've not seen an update to the, I think it was Anchorage Daily News story that showed them as kind of the three amigos just trying to make it to Nome together. So yeah, that was really kind of interesting when I got up this morning and I realized that they were not camping together. They kind of left Lisbeth back a little bit behind, and it looks like Kaylin is about 20 miles ahead of Lisbeth now, and Yuka about 10 miles ahead of Kaylin. So it's interesting. I know that they were traveling together just because of storms and animal issues, animals on the trail, not dog issues necessarily. So I guess the run from Cripple to the Yukon has been easier in that regard, is my guess. And so they're just going to run their own races now. But I have not seen anything that suggests, there was like a falling out between the three amigos or anything exciting like that. I think they're just on their schedules now.
And you had mentioned that Kaylin Davis is about 20 miles ahead of Lisbeth. And when you think about that, they're only traveling about 5 miles an hour. So that is a pretty significant spot between those two. That's, not just, it's just 20 miles. 20 miles at 5 miles an hour is a long way. And just a little bit of a musher's perspective on Yuka and Kaylin and Lisbeth's progress. Dogs are going to be dogs, and even though the mushers may want to travel together, it's often the dogs that set the pace. And if Yuka's dogs want to go a little bit faster and they pull away, or the other two teams want to go much slower and pull back, that's often how even these camping trips or whatever take place, and one team will go ahead or behind. And one thing you do not want to do in mushing is constantly leapfrog. Not only is that just mentally draining on the dogs, but it's terrible for the musher because you have to stop, let one person pass, and then you have to stop again and let the next one pass, and it can be a literal game of Frogger out there on the trail, and it can get tiring and taxing very fast. So now let's jump to the front of the pack, and we have Brent Sass, Dallas Seavey, Aaron Burmeister, Richie Deal, and Jesse Holmes, and they are in a very interesting portion of the race, especially in between Unikalit and Shaktulik. And I know you have a little bit of an update on Brent. What do you have?
Well, Brent, we all thought that he was going to run into Koyuk and maybe take a break there. And we will admit that, Brent does not like to stay in checkpoints. He's made that very clear over the years that he prefers to stay outside of the hustle and bustle of a busy checkpoint, which I totally get. You want your dogs well rested. But he camped between the shelter cabin on the way to cross the Norton Sound. He passed by that, and he decided to camp in between that and Koyuk on the sea ice. And right now they have a ground blizzard storm going on, which to me does not suggest that it would be all that much fun or that anybody would get well rested. But he basically on Insider just kind of shrugged and went, no, it's actually really nice. We're in the heat of the day, and as the wind's whipping around him. And I just do not understand that mentality as someone who is like watching these videos and wrapping up in more and more blankets, just trying to stay warm, because mentally I'm freezing watching these teams cross the Norton Sound in this ground storm. And Dallas, of course, did rest at the shelter cabin and is now moving again across the sea ice. He's still a good distance behind Brent. It's not like Dallas is going to concede, I think, at this point, but it's going to take Brent making some mistakes for Dallas to have the ability to take control of the race. But we've seen it happen before. I keep reminding people of 2014 where, everything went to hell on the last day between White Mountain and Nome, and he ended up winning that in an impossible win. Everyone said there was no way he would be able to go from third to first, and he proved us all wrong. The really interesting race is from third to about 12 or 15 place, because you were talking about no one really likes to leapfrog all the time. That is literally what the chase pack has been doing for the last 2.5 days. And it's even shaking up even more today. You've got suddenly Dan Caduce is in the midst of it. He's resting right now in 6th place. And Aaron Peck, you can see him starting to make a move, and it's just incredible. So even if Brent and Dallas don't change or even run down Front Street together, it's still going to be an exciting race after they get through, because there's no way to tell who's third, who's on first, what's on second, that sort of thing.
And that's why we follow Iditarod. It is a race of inches and a race of days for sure. And I think it's just as fun to watch the rest of the pack come in after the winners as it is to watch that first one come in. And that's one of the reasons why we made the decision when we first started doing this coverage that we are on through the banquet, because there are so many stories that happen, not only that first day when so many mushers come in, but all the stuff that happens in the next few days afterwards. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about. And we're one of the very few podcasts or other media outlets that does that. Most of them cover that first day or so of winners or finishers, as if you will, and then they pack up shop and move on. Of course, they have other stories to cover and things to do, but that's the way that we do it, and I've always enjoyed talking about that. Let's talk just briefly about that sea ice. That's one of the most precarious sections of the trail. I think it's about 20 miles or so between those two spots where they're literally on the ocean. Of course, it's frozen at the time. And if you guys ever saw the movie Togo, the Disney movie Togo, I believe this is the spot where it was totally out of this world, but it kind of gives you an idea of what it's like, and it's a little bit different than being on the river, because a river just pretty much runs one way, whether it's north and south or east or west. But when you're on the open ocean, things can really get dicey. And I know nobody's ever floated out on an iceberg like I think they showed in Togo, but there have been many, many times where a musher will take off the wrong way, and you will see their little tracker beacon just kind of deet on their own, and everybody in the world literally loses their mind, thinking, oh my God, they're going to fall off the end of the earth as they are off trail on the sea ice. Did I cover everything there?
Yeah, for the most part, I have heard of people, not mushers necessarily, but people, have floated out to sea on the ice. And of course, Togo was very Hollywoodized about it. But from my understanding, Leonard Seppala also made that story bigger and bigger whenever he told it, with the sea ice breaking up. This year, it looks like they did have to reroute a little bit due to the big windstorm that we were talking about last night. It has caused, I guess, jumbo ice to move closer where they wanted to run the trail. And I've even heard some reports of seeing some open water. So they moved it a little bit to the right and closer to the shore, but nothing so drastic like we've seen in the past where they've actually run on land.
Right.
But for the most part, it's for me, it's the most terrifying part of the entire race. I think the gorge is cool. I like hearing about the war stories there, but the whole time someone's on the sea ice, I'm just like, find something else to do, distract yourself, and hope they make it into Koyuk soon.
And of course, the dogs are absolute masters at finding the trail, especially if other dog teams have run over them or they've been on that trail before. That's the sixth sense that dogs have. But remember, Brent Sass, he's in first place, so he doesn't have the benefit right now of a new scent, if you will, of dog teams that have recently run over that. So all the other dog teams behind him will pick up that scent of Brent and Dallas and then on, and it makes it a little bit easier to follow as they go along the way. And just a quick story about the way that they mark the trail on Iditarod. depending on where you're at on the trail will depend on how far away the markers are. If it's close to a turn, whether it's left or right, you will see markers much closer together. If there's a hazard, as Toni mentioned, open water, there will definitely be more markers that way. But otherwise, I believe they're about a quarter to a half a mile or so. Is that correct, Toni?
Yeah, I think so. It really depends, and they're on the sea ice, and it doesn't really matter because it's going to all blow away anyway.
Yes, and the markers are very specific. They typically have orange at the top, a sort of a reflective orange, I think usually a blue color or so, and then they have a little reflective piece of tape, and then of course most of the time it's just looks like a garden stake, just a thin piece of slat that they use for the markers. And I know on several parts of the trail are the old school tripods that they've used for I don't know how many decades. But for the most part, there's literally thousands of these markers along the trail. And when we talk about that Iditarod machine and how they sort of roll up the checkpoint, the last part of the trail often is responsible for picking those up. Now, I know that other organizations use the trail. For example, the Iditarod Invitational or Trail Classic, whatever they're calling it these days, is either somewhere in the middle of this pack or behind them. And of course, a lot of the Iron Dog machiners have used this same trail, at least in some part, a couple of weeks ahead of time of the Iditarod Trail. So the marking is a story of itself, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about that because it is not a perfectly marked trail for 1,000 miles. That's just logistically impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, and, like I said, weather comes up and it's going to blow all of your plans. A lot of the time, or at least in races past, with other races, they've used different colored markers, and sometimes those get seen and the musher is tired, and so they follow those, and that's how you have someone like Nick Petit going 2 hours in the wrong direction, coming out of Shakulik and trying to get to Koyuk. And I know one year when Dan Seavey was running, we watched him pinball quite a bit on the Norton sea ice because he couldn't find the Iditarod markers. He'd see a marker, he'd think that's what it was, and then it turned out to be a different kind of marker. And so we watched him pinball for quite a bit. So it's pretty. At this point in the race, man, you just got to know where you're going and hope the person in front of you knows where they're going.
Yes, for sure. So let's talk about a really breaking story. You just got confirmation as we hit record, and that is about Martin Booser's kennel updated the story, but it's about our musher of the day, Matt Failer, last night. And it's an interesting one because this has been a story of this year's races, not only Iditarod, but the qualifiers. And we've mentioned it several times on our coverage over the last week or so. It has to do with a moose. What do you know?
So I got a message this morning from someone around 9 o'clock saying that they had heard a rumor that Matthew Failer had come into the checkpoint of New Lotto and he was covered in blood, and it was because he had to dispatch a moose on the trail. Now, when I say dispatch, that means he used a gun, he pointed at the moose, went bang, and the moose is no longer with us. The rules state that if an animal, a wildlife animal, attacks the team, you are allowed to have a firearm to dispatch that animal. But if you make that choice to dispatch the animal, then you are in charge of not only making sure that someone within the race knows about it, but you have to stay with that animal. You cannot progress your race until you have dressed out that animal. so in that situation, Matt, not only did he have to dispatch the moose, but he had to dress out the moose. And those things are big. If you've followed me on social media in the past, you've watched my live feeds when my dad is dressing out a moose for our roadkill program down here on the peninsula. They're big, they're bloody, they're smelly. I'm sure he was running on adrenaline, but he also did not have most likely the proper equipment to really dress out a moose quickly. So I can only imagine the sight that it was. But my understanding, reading Martin Boozer's post that he posted about a half an hour ago now, the moose came up on Martin's team first, and it was pretty aggressive. But Martin was able to get the moose and get past it, get the moose out of the way and go past it. Well, the moose was apparently very annoyed by that whole thing. And so when Matthew Thaler came up a little while later, the moose was not as willing to move out of the way. And so Matt had to do the right thing, in my opinion, which is protect the dogs and his own life at all costs. And so that's the story. No dogs were hurt or injured, or even, I don't know if the moose actually got into the teams, but according to Martin Boozer's Facebook page, it says everyone was amped up and it was fairly harrowing experience, but no dogs were injured. Phew. But the other thing with that rule of dressing out a moose is any team that comes up behind that musher that's dressing out the moose, they cannot progress either. They have to help with the dressing out of the animal. So it's one of those things where, you know, they got to preserve the meat because the Alaska State Troopers will take possession of that meat, and then they will dispatch it just like you would a roadkill situation. They'll give it out to families in need in the local communities.
Yeah, thankfully he had the firearm. I know these days a lot of mushers do not carry firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, of course, everybody had a rifle, and and that was just sort of the mandatory gear. But that is not on the mandatory gear list. And of course, we could definitely talk about what's on there as well. I'm wondering, Toni, I don't know if the post says this or not, but you mentioned that he had to let somebody on the Iditarod, in the Iditarod, an official of some sort, know about this. Did he have to push his button on his tracker to get that? Or, because obviously if you're in the middle of nowhere, you may not see anybody for several hours, whether it be another musher or obviously an official, because the officials aren't just tooting around the trail. They're typically busy in the checkpoints unless something's happening.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how they do that now. I would assume that back in the day they were able to at least send one team ahead to just give the race judge in the next checkpoint, hey, a heads up that there's a moose and state troopers need to be called. But I don't know in this particular situation on the Yukon, and I'm not familiar with cell service, but I assume that since Nulato is one of the bigger communities out there, and I'm not sure how close they were to the checkpoint when that happened, he may have even been able to just, use a satellite phone or a cell phone to get somebody's attention. I'm sure Martin, when he got into the checkpoint, also probably made mention to the race judge that, hey, there's an aggressive moose on the trail. But again, not knowing, every detail about where this actually happened on the trail. I know that it was closer to Nulato than it was the other checkpoint. But other than that, I'm not sure if an SOS button was pushed or a cell phone was used.
Very interesting story for sure. There has been so many moose encounters throughout this mushing season, and thankfully nobody has really gotten, people of course have really gotten injured. Now there has been several dogs that have been injured because of that, and that's always a tragedy as well. But moose, man, I tell you what, they are nothing to be messed with up here in Alaska for sure. So we are definitely running long today, and we haven't even got to our story of the day. So last night was 49 minutes. Hopefully we don't go too much longer than that, but we have a very cool program that kicked off several years ago when social media really kicked off, and that is the Ugly Dogs. And I know that you can probably explain it a heck of a lot better than I can, but I remember those early days of Twitter when it was just pretty much me, you, Alex, Quince Mountain, and a couple of others that were dedicated fans, not only here on the podcast, but on Twitter in particular. And then that has quickly blossomed, in particular when a very well-known musher now took part in the race, and it truly did change the way that fans watch and interact with the race. So it is the Ugly Dogs. What is that, and what is it all about?
So the Ugly Dogs started after you mentioned Quince Mountain, who was one of our original. I did a fan group that was about 8 of us, and we were the nerdy group on Twitter. But Quince's wife, Blair Braverman, is an award-winning author. And when her book, Welcome to the Goddamn Ice Cube, came out, her fandom kind of exploded. It really touched a lot of people, even people that weren't really into mushing. And suddenly she had this huge following, and it just kind of coincided with Blair wanting to run the Iditarod. She had done her qualifiers, and she was getting ready to sign up for Iditarod. And suddenly Twitter had exploded into Musher Twitter, which has quite a following now. And it grew exponentially. I swear overnight, I went from having like maybe 100 followers to over 1,000 followers in just one afternoon, because Blair tweeted out that, hey, Toni's going to be there when I sign up, so follow her too. It's a wonderfully open, warm, giving community. And in fact, I've been a beneficiary of that. When I bought my home, they all decided they needed to help me furnish it, and I'm looking at quite a few of the gifts here in my house right now. But the Iditarod started during Blair's race, and I don't actually know the story very well because I was in Nome at the time, and so I don't understand the entire panic situation. But Blair had a moment similar to what we talked about the other night that most rookies do, of what the heck am I doing right now on the Iditarod? This is crazy. And she started to have second thoughts. She was stuck, I believe, at Old Woman Cabin, and she just sat there for a couple of days, and her fans were getting very, very nervous, very worried about her. And in the process of that, they found out that a lot of the native villages, their schools, were in desperate need of supplies. And so to get their mind off of what their musher was or was not doing, they decided to start funding all of these different projects along the Iditarod Trail. And it's grown from that to an annual thing where they just start at the beginning of Iditarod and they go straight through to the finish, where they fund different projects. They send money to different charities. There's a whole list on igiverod.com of different charities that they are supporting this year. There's the Donors Choose platform that they can help fund different school projects along the Iditarod Trail in other parts of rural Alaska. It's mind-boggling. I believe the first Iditarod donated more than $100,000, and that was just in the last third of the race. They didn't even go from start to finish on that. So it's overwhelming. It's amazing. The Ugly Dog community, like I said, is just such an open, giving community, and they've really invigorated, I think, the mushing fandom. They are so they're quick studies. I actually follow some of them, and I learn stuff about the different races that they follow. So I love it because, like you said, we went from a handful of people on Twitter to hundreds of people on Twitter. This is what we want to see. This is one of the ways to grow the sport, and I love to see it. I wish more of the mushing community embrace Twitter. I understand that it can be overwhelming, but to have that kind of fan base that doesn't just love Blair and Quince, they love so many different mushers, so many different kennels. It's truly inspiring.
And Blair and Quince, they haven't run their race in a couple of years. They've been doing other things. Of course, they wrote a book that's now pretty dang popular and very popular to be sold on social media and the like. So I have a couple of questions that I don't know the answer to, and that is, who is the typical Ugly Dog fan? Is it somebody that is very well versed in Iditarod? Is it a newbie? Is it somebody in between? Who would you sort of give the avatar to?
Oh, goodness. The Ugly Dog is all of those. It's really more, I think, not so much the knowledge of the sport, the race, or even their musher. It's more of the spirit of that fan group. They're more than just mushing fans. They're, like I said, they're a giving, wonderful community, very supportive, not just financially, but emotionally. They check in on each other. They go and meet each other. I mean, this is it's almost like Comic-Con in a way, or that sort of group of people, where there's just this family atmosphere. And so I can't say that, the well-versed ones are the better Ugly Dogs than the newbies. They all just kind of have that same spirit of generosity and enthusiasm.
And as you know, Toni, the Iditarod holds their cards pretty close to the vest, as if their way is the best way in terms of promoting the race. Right. In particular, they're very particular on media and internet access and folks on the trail reporting and all of that. Do you know what their response is to this group, in particular, using the name? And the reason I say that is I know of several businesses here in Alaska that have gotten cease and desist orders for using Iditarod in their name, whether it be, Bob's Iditarod Kennel or Iditarod Coffee or whatever. They're very quick to jump on that. Have you heard any negative from what they do?
Not officially. I haven't heard anything that's anti the Iditarod. The Iditarod doesn't go out of its way to promote it or even mention it. That I've noticed since the first time. The first time, I'm pretty sure Iditarod just went with it because it was a big media sensation and a positive one. So I haven't seen anything to suggest that, Iditarod's going to come and swing the hammer down on them. I think that it would be unwise to do that if anybody in that organization wanted to do that, just because it's such a positive thing that was inspired by this race, that it would be wrong, in my opinion, to go after them. This isn't like that shopping cart race that used to happen down in the lower 48 that Iditarod finally said, no, you can't use our name.
Right, right. And the only other thing I have to add, at least from my understanding of it, is they're not hardcore activists. Of course, we have a lot of activists on the other side of mushing that are quick to defame and whatnot, anything that happens with Iditarod. It does not appear to me that the Ugly Dogs as a fan group are, of course, they're very active and very hoorah, but they're not, putting their stake in the ground and saying this is how it has to be. They're not playing that hardcore activist role as the other side is, are they?
No, they're not. There's every once in a while that something will come out, like when Jay Fouché was going through her incident with getting hit by a car on the road while she was training. A certain activist group took that and ran with it, and the ugly dogs there, they got their hackles up, not no pun intended, and yet it was. Who am I kidding? They got their hackles up. They wanted to have a strong answer for that, even though Jay is not one of their main mushers. They really did feel for her and come again to support her. She is part of the Twitter community on musher Twitter, and they wanted to protect her from that, but at the same time, you can't play by those people's rules. And they're very good at self-governing. If one person wants to, go rabid, or they call it blairal instead of feral, there are other people within the group that are very well respected that can kind of pull people back and say, okay, let's do this maturely. Let's do this the right way so that it doesn't bring more harm to the race or to the musher or whatever may be the issue. So they're really level-headed even in some of those more passionate moments.
And so how can folks follow these guys? You mentioned them on Twitter. You had also put out a website address. What is the best way people can follow? And then for the Iditarod, how can they donate if they choose?
Sure. To donate to Iditarod, I think that's the more important part of the story here right now. It's igivearod.com. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I've tried to follow it, but following everything in the race is almost impossible. But then to find out about the ugly dog community, the best way to do it is they're mainly on Twitter. So all you have to do is find the hashtag ugly dogs. Make sure that there's an S. Otherwise, you find like an anime community or something. But ugly dogs, plural. And you'll find all of the wonderful stories, the wonderful people. And I'm half the time I'm on that hashtag too. So it's a very busy community, and not just during race season.
There you go. And we always make sure to tag our shows with that as well. And we get a lot of retweets and shares and everything from that group. So they've definitely helped us out on our show for sure over the years. So let's talk about our musher profiles of the night. We have two. It's a husband and wife team. Jeff and Katie Joe. Is that right?
I think it's Katie Joe, though I did hear somebody say the other day Catty Joe. So
okay.
It's one or the other, but I think it's Katie Joe.
Start us off, since this was your pick.
Okay, so they are a husband and wife team. They met when Katie Joe came up to work summer jobs in Alaska, and she found herself working for one of the dog sled tours there on the Panhandle in the Juneau area, I believe. And she really it was another one, kind of like last night when we were talking about Matt meeting his wife. She was not looking to become a musher. She wasn't looking to become a musher's wife, but that's how it happened. They just really loved the lifestyle. They loved working together. And so now they have their own kennel in the interior called Black Spruce Dog Sledding, I believe, is the proper name. And this year is Katie Joe's rookie year. Again, she was never really coming into this planning to ever run the Iditarod, but she said in her biography that it was just a natural progression after all of this time. Jeff, of course, has been climbing the ranks of Iditarod for the last few years. His rookie year was in 2008, but then he started running regularly starting in 2018, and he's in the last 4 years jumped from 43rd place to 12th place last year. That's not going to happen this year. His dogs ended up coming down with that stomach bug. He's down to, I think at last check, he was down to 9 dogs. It might be even lower than that at this point. So when he decided that his race was pretty much over, he's just really wanting to make sure that the dogs make it to Nome so that they have a good base for next year. He decided he was going to sit and wait in the checkpoint until his wife got there, and then they were just going to go on a camping trip together and make it to Nome. And he told Insider at the time, he's like, that's the plan, and I hope she's not angry with me when she shows up and I'm here. So Katie Jo's got 11 dogs, Jeff has 9 dogs, and they are both sitting at mile 545, which is in Galena. And it looks like they've both taken their mandatory rest of the 24 and the 8. So they're just taking their time, making sure all the dogs are healthy, happy, and that they get down to Nome so that she can get her belt buckle and that he can just say he finished this year's race.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here looking at their website right now, and I remember years ago, I think it was right after Jeff's second race, I had him on Mushing Radio, and he talked about his trials and tribulations as an Iditarod musher, and I didn't know until looking at his race standings that he took such a long break between 2008 and 2018 running Iditarod. That's 10 years. That is an enormous amount of time. That is a couple of generations of dogs, and typically a dog's working life is about 6 or 8 years. So a puppy born after that first Iditarod probably was not running in that second Iditarod. Of course, 10 years later, its offspring potentially could have, but not that same dog that was in that first Iditarod for sure. But what is cool about their website, Toni, is I'm looking at it right now, and they are a tour business out of the Fairbanks area, and they have an embed on their website from TripAdvisor, and they are ranked number 1 out of 95 of outdoor activities to do in Fairbanks, according to TripAdvisor. And I think that's pretty impressive because there are lots and lots of dog mushers, Iditarod mushers and the like, who do tours of some sort. My neighbor right up the road from us is a very popular sled dog tour. But if you're ranked first out of all of them in the Fairbanks area, he and his wife are doing something special up there, aren't they?
They are. You know, they're a really positive couple. I've not gotten to spend a lot of time with them. But he did come down and run the Testamina 200 a couple of times. And they were just always so upbeat, willing to talk with anybody, answer any questions. And then when I was in Nome the last time, I sat with his wife waiting for him to come in because neither one of us could get the GPS to work at our hotel. And so we just had to sit out there because they were running right by the Aurora in that year. So we just had to sit and wait for the teams and just hope that it was whoever we were waiting for. So just a really nice couple, a really great kennel from what I can tell. Their kennel only updates, I think, once or twice a day, and that's because the people that they have running their website and their social media are also running their tours right now and taking care of the dogs that are still there. So it's a really small organization, but it's a really well-run organization. So I'm not surprised that they're right up there at the top.
And I remember when I interviewed Jeff, he was adamant to talk about the artist that did his artwork for his website. And this was back in the day before the new website designs that are pretty common, that full banner website that you see. And he had so many artist depictions of all these things that were going on in the dogs' lives, and he so much wanted to promote the artist that did that. I don't recall who that was, but he was so proud of that, and you can still see it in their logo, the black spruce dog sledding. And of course, if you're interested in taking a tour and you are in the Fairbanks area, it seems to be that these are the guys to visit. And you can find out more about it on blacksprucedogsledding.com. As Toni mentioned, they're following each other together. It's sort of that get down the trail and help each other out, as we've talked about several times throughout this race with Kaylin and Lisbeth, and the Barrington twins often run this way, and many folks that aren't necessarily ultra competitive will often find a partner and travel down the trail that way. And of course they can share duties and if one of them gets into trouble or whatever, the other person is there to help them out. So I guess it is my turn to pick the musher profile of the night, and we have been going male, female, almost the entire list. So I'm going to ask you, Toni, should we do a male or female tomorrow, and then I'll pick.
Let's go with female, because I think we're back on that schedule now.
All right, so I am going to pick one that maybe we haven't done before. Let's talk about... Boy, it's tough, isn't it? Let's talk about Yuka. Let's talk about Yuka Honda. I don't think we've ever spoken about her in all the times that we've done this. I don't even know how many times. Oh, this is her. Actually, it's not. 2015 was her rookie year, so this is her second year. So she's back after a 7-year hiatus. So let's talk about her tomorrow.
Yep. All right. Good luck researching her, because she's kind of hard to find online.
Oh boy, yeah. So I'll see what I can find, and maybe you can do the same, telling us about what's happened on the Insider. I know we talked a little bit about her yesterday, and maybe if we don't find anything, we'll do 2 mushers tomorrow with that. Okay, so we are well over time. Are there any other stories we missed, or anything else you want to share? And I say that because 2 nights ago, news broke right when we got off the air.
Right. I have not seen anything. I know that both Brent and Dallas are now moving into Koyuk, and I think the last time I looked, Brent was just about there. So let me pull that up really quick to see if we've got any changes in the standings. I doubt it. I'm going to make us go really long because I can't get the computer to pull it up. But it looks like, Sass is just about off of the sea ice, so he should be coming into Koyuk probably right about the time this gets posted online.
All right, and then we truly have a race, because that is the race to the last few checkpoints. And last night we gave our predictions on when it was going to end, and you can definitely find out those by listening to last night's episode, and maybe drop us a note on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, wherever. Let us know when you think you will see a winner in Nome. So on behalf of my co-host today, we will talk to you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio.
So earlier, you learned about First Paw Coffee Company. Now I'm going to tell you about its Trailbreaker Blend. First Paw Coffee Company's Trailbreaker Blend is inspired by our love of the Northern Lights, frosty paws, and sled dog trails. How cool is that? The Trailbreaker Blend is a private label premium blend that was developed just for them. It's a medium dark roast from Central and South America, highlighting flavors of brown sugar, hazelnut, and plum. Be sure to go to ak.dog/free and enter to win a bunch of cool prizes. That's ak.dog/free.